Thank you for tuning in to the Red Clinic podcast. I'm Dr. Schwalen, licensed psychologist and expert in the treatment of eating disorders. The Red Clinic podcast is a place where we talk about all different kinds of eating disorders, the full spectrum of eating disorders, different things that people need to know about the treatment of eating disorders, and all different types of issues that even might come up if you or a loved one are experiencing an eating disorder. We also really like to focus on eating disorder relapse prevention and recovery because that's what we do at the Red Clinic at Next Steps Worldwide. And so today, someone who is an integral part in helping us with eating disorder relapse prevention and recovery at the clinic is our Director of Nutrition Services, registered dietitian, Melissa Bloom. And she is here joining us today because she is also one of the most key players on our team, super critical to the treatment of eating disorders at our clinic, and just a wonderful person who I love working with. So I'm glad you're here today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm going to ask you to come a lot more.
I'm totally fine with that.
So Melissa, you kind of had a heads up in terms of, me letting you know that I kind of wanted you here today. Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the topic that you want to discuss today?
Well, one of my favorite topics, Dr. Schwalen, to talk about is the concepts of intuitive eating. What is intuitive eating? How do we implement it? How do we start it? And mainly, what is it? So many people have misconceptions about what intuitive eating is that I'd love to clarify that for our viewers today.
Okay. Well, I just thought intuitive eating was, being super mindful when you're eating, and it's kind of like I've seen things, on TV, or I've heard things about like the Dove chocolate, like be super mindful when you eat a piece of chocolate, and maybe you'll have some intuitions with that. or isn't it just kind of eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full?
Most people do think that about intuitive eating, but it's actually an approach to teach all of us how to tune into our hunger and fullness cues and then improve our relationship with food. So it completely rejects all dieting mentality. It doesn't involve willpower or strength with not eating. It actually influences us and teaches us how to tune into ourselves and, most importantly, trust what we're feeling around food and our food behaviors.
So, as the psychologist who does therapy with our clients, we always talk about, being intuitive or having insight. And so this is the parallel of that, but when it comes to nutrition.
Exactly.
Okay. So what I just heard you say is it completely rejects the diet mentality. So I will just tell you right now that probably all of our listeners have maybe turned off our podcast because they don't want to listen anymore, or they don't understand what that even means, because eating disorder or not, our society is impacted by the diet mentality. So Absolutely. Can we talk about that for just a second before we jump into intuitive eating and what that means? Because I think we need to help people get okay with rejecting the diet mentality.
Absolutely. Again, this is another one of my most passionate topics to discuss, and it's actually pillar number 1 of intuitive eating. So rejecting the dieting mentality essentially means that we are on the road to understanding that diets don't work. And they actually don't, per multiple research studies over a broad span of time with multiple participants. Over time, diets just don't work. People usually end up at higher body weights than they ever were before, going back and forth, yo-yoing between different weight fluctuations and relationships with food and food choices and decisions, that it just doesn't work. So if we understand that on a basic level, rejecting it and understanding that for a lot of people, dieting has essentially ruined people's relationship with food. It's restrictive. It's always inaccurate. It's always fad-based, and people just can't follow diets long term. And a common, I believe I said this in our last podcast that I was on, diets fail people. People don't fail diets. There's a reason why that that phrase is so popular and true.
Right. And I'm so glad you said it, because I was thinking it, and I was really literally going to say it if you didn't say it. So if someone who's on a diet is not successful at the diet, it's not that they failed. It's literally because the diet failed them. And so that's what's really important to think about here. Mm-hmm. So we reject the diet mentality. Oh, I need to lose some weight, and the way I'm going to do that is by going on a diet, right? Or even the idea of I need to lose some weight. I mean, we don't even really want to talk about numbers and weight as an indicator of health, right, and kind of where someone needs to be in life. Quality of life is achieved in so many broader aspects.
Absolutely.
Okay. So diets fail people. So for that reason, we reject that dieting is a thought process or a strategy that we need to pursue.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
What's next on intuitive eating?
So what's next on intuitive eating is actually honoring our hunger. So many people, when we follow diets, and that's one of the reasons why the pillar rejecting the dieting mentality is before honoring our hunger, is being okay with being hungry. Like, hunger is such this negative feeling that people experience when actually it's just a basic physiological or biological cue that we need to be okay with allowing ourselves to feel. There is absolutely nothing wrong with us when we feel hungry. We don't need to ignore that. We don't need to say, oh man, I shouldn't be hungry at this time because I ate 5 hours ago. Allowing ourselves to actually feel the true physiological feelings with food and being, most importantly, okay with that.
Okay. So again, I'm going to make another parallel, because the psychologist in me, when I'm doing therapy with our clients, will all day long tell clients that we just need to be okay with our emotions. We don't need to judge them as negative, right? Emotions tell us something. They can be a very good source of information. Mm-hmm. And if we learn how to tune into those feelings and what's coming up for us in the moment, we're able to understand kind of what to do next or how to meet our needs. And so you also mentioned the example of I shouldn't be hungry because I just ate 5 hours ago. Well, I also want to make it okay that you can be hungry even if you ate just 30 minutes ago, right?
True. Mm-hmm.
So when people are hungry and we tune in to that feeling, it's really just our bodies kind of signaling a message to us.
Yes. And another reason why rejecting the dieting mentality goes before honoring our hunger is because diets just teach us to turn that off. So our bodies, if we reject that mentality, our bodies will then learn to say, hey, I'm hungry. We'll learn to tune into that feeling again. And there's so many different pieces to the puzzle with feeling hunger and fullness cues, which is another topic. But for now, it's really allowing ourselves to actually open up the space of, hey, I'm hungry, and recognizing that cue.
So essentially, if we ignore the hunger cue long enough, our body can start to not even interpret it.
Right.
Okay. And that's important to know.
Absolutely. And especially if we are working on mental health, anxiety, depression, things like that can interfere with our ability to feel those cues too. And then add that on top of it, it makes it ultra confusing to tune into our body sometimes.
Okay. So that mind-body connection piece for our clients with eating disorders is so important.
Yep.
Now, one other thing I want to just take some time to mention here is that a lot of times clients with eating disorders will think in that manner, like I shouldn't be hungry right now. I just ate 30 minutes ago or 5 hours ago. They'll also almost judge their hunger in the opposite manner. So there are many clients that I've worked with and that we've worked with that have said, I actually love feeling hungry. That feeling of hunger is a sign that I'm being successful in my eating disorder. The hungrier I feel, the better it is for me because I'm stronger. I have willpower. I'm able to overcome that hunger and not have to do anything about it. And so it can be viewed almost as something really positive when someone's deep in the eating disorder.
Right. Absolutely. It's like that feeling of hunger and pushing it off further and further, like you said, is that feeling of the eating disorder accomplishing more and more and more.
Right. And now the last example I want to just bring up, just so we're kind of also providing education to family members who might be trying to support someone with an eating disorder, is that there are some individuals with eating disorders who may even say that they intentionally ignored their hunger feeling or pushed through it because feeling hungry was a way that they punished themselves. And so whenever there's some shame or sense of self-punishment involved, which is very common in eating disorders, the hunger pain can actually be something that individuals will go towards because it is a way that they are punishing, or the eating disorder is punishing them, right? So I just want to throw that out there because all of this goes into how and when we recommend a client should even work on intuitive eating.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. So keep going.
Okay. So then I'm going to open the door to pillars number 3 and 4 in talking about this, making peace with food and getting rid of the food police. That's one of my favorites in intuitive eating concepts of really allowing ourselves to eat what we want and what our heart desires, of not restricting or following a diet that really says, hey, you can't do that at all. Giving yourself that unconditional permission to eat. And that lovely voice in our head that's often there judging us and saying, no, you can't eat this at this time. Challenging that, which is known in intuitive eating as the food police. And so opening up the door to less food judgment around what we want to have versus what we feel like we should have based on a diet.
So when we have ideas or like thoughts or cravings or something like that, when our body wants something, is that a way that, you know, if we're tuned into that, that our physiological processes are communicating with us? I mean, do we crave things for a reason?
Yeah. So sometimes when we're craving things like, for example, orange juice or strawberries, maybe our body is telling us we need a little bit more vitamin C. If we are craving things like are more greeny or nuts and seeds, then maybe our body needs some more fiber. What if we're craving potassium? We may feel like we need to have a banana at that time. So there's definitely some science behind the physiological reason behind food cravings. So It's not just all up here, but our brain's really smart in letting us know that in the form of cravings.
Okay, so I like to just break things down, you know. So I take really complex things, I try to break them down for all my clients to understand. And so what I think I hear you saying really is our bodies are very good and natural at cueing us into when we should eat or what, like when we're feeling hungry. Sometimes even the foods we should be eating. Now, what about times when we are hungry but don't have any idea of what we want?
Sometimes that happens. And that's where we were dabbling in this a bit last time too, of having some structure in your life as well. So that's another misconception on intuitive eating that leads me to understanding that intuitive eating is not just a lot of people think of free for all. That's a common term that I see with our clients when we embark on this journey. It's not. It's really teaching us, okay, how do I moderate my food intake based on my internal cues? And sometimes that does take structure because sometimes we don't know if we're feeling hunger or fullness, and that happens. So having our go-to items, things that we really enjoy outside of the dieting mentality, and knowing those are options and just feeling what sounds, decent, what sounds okay in this moment in time without that food judgment or based on following a diet, that food decision is made.
Okay. And so it's kind of like people just need to get out of their own way, right? And just start connecting with their body.
Yep.
So how do you, in nutrition sessions, start working on intuitive eating with clients who have eating disorders?
Number one is assessing if we are appropriate for working on intuitive eating, like you had said. And when we determine that from a very treatment team approach, we dive into really where we're at in each pillar of intuitive eating. And there are 10. We may not get through all 10 of them today, but we go through each of those concepts and where our mind is at. With depending upon what eating disorder or what our personal or individual struggles are with clients, depends upon how intuitive eating is guided. So sometimes clients, the first pillar will be rejecting the dieting mentality. That will be one that they easily adopt. Sometimes it won't be. Sometimes with our clients who may struggle with restriction, finding our hunger and fullness cues may take a little bit longer, but the other concepts of intuitive eating can absolutely be more worked on as we discover the hunger and fullness cues too. So it's very much so like everything else with nutrition, walking alongside of someone. It is a process. It isn't a destination, intuitive eating by any means. It's a journey, just like recovery as a part of the recovery process. And it's a way of eating. And a lot of times I refer to it as a way of life in our relationship with food.
Okay. And so let's jump back into the pillars. So we talked about the first 4.
Yeah. So we're testing my memory right now. Honoring your fullness is actually the next, or feeling your fullness, should I say. And that's really tuning into when we are feeling satiated. Now, there is a lot of fine lines here with intuitive eating and eating disorder recovery. So it's really important that we start intuitive eating at the appropriate time, but feeling our fullness and when we're truly satisfied with what we're eating. If one bite of food is what we're feeling satisfied on, we need to really question that. And if we overeat, feeling that and recognizing that, and most importantly, not judging ourselves for it. So a common term also used is our mistakes in eating. I don't know how I feel about that term because I feel like there are no mistakes. It's just a process, but learning how to gauge those feelings of hunger and fullness outside of judgment.
Okay. And so in a nutrition session, how would you help a client with that?
So there's a lovely reference guide that there are tons of them out there. It's a hunger and fullness scale.
Okay.
So identifying different types of hunger and fullness. So there isn't just hunger and there isn't just full. There's different types and different feelings associated with each level of hunger and level of fullness. And we really want to stay in a narrower range in the middle, close to the neutral feeling, not getting really hangry. A lot of people are familiar with that term, angry and hungry at the same time. That's too hungry. And then really, really, really stuffed, feeling full to the point of illness. We want to stay somewhere in the middle for the most part. So helping our clients through those feelings at each meal and snack, really understanding how to identify and getting the practice on, okay, for breakfast, I'm typically hungrier than the rest of the day, and noticing that about ourselves. Again, free of judgment.
Okay. And so what you're describing actually reminds me of a client that you and I have helped out in the past. She was a client of ours for a couple of years, I think, and she got to the point where on her recovery journey, she was able to start working on some intuitive eating. Mm-hmm. And I remember that one day she was processing in session with me that she felt like she completely bombed it, that she messed up her whole meal plan, was really upset because she felt like maybe she got way too full. Mm-hmm. And I actually called you in at that point and I said, hey, let's talk about this. I need to know, is this more eating disorder related and just fear of whatever that eating disorder might be telling her about the food she chose to eat? Or is this truly an intuitive eating, issue, that you need to step in on? So mm-hmm. was it more to process in therapy or more to process in the nutrition sessions, which we're always trying to, balance that out, because in a therapy session, we don't want to ever just talk about the food. We don't really want to talk about food in therapy. I'm just going to put that out there. Food is just a distraction. The eating disorder is much deeper than just the food. And even though the food is a part of it, the underlying feelings and emotions and processes are really where you get the most impact in a therapy session with a psychologist or a therapist. So how would you handle something like that in a nutrition session with a client?
Yeah. So really discovering just their pattern of eating prior and their ability to follow their meal plan, giving them feedback around that, but understanding and getting insight into, was it more of a food that we felt that it would make us gain weight? Was it more of a fear food? Was it more of an anxiety-provoking food versus just another meal? And that often can bring about feelings of premature fullness too. When we're feeling anxious, say the meal is something that the client hasn't had for a while, and they may be gauging their sense of fullness really prematurely because of their anxiety. And I would work to that and see if that was an issue, or if it really was a sense of overeating. I will say most of the time it's the first situation I said.
And so it's kind of like they talked it up so much in their head that they convinced themselves that they were full.
Yep.
Right. So that premature fullness is kind of like your fancy way of saying you just told yourself you were full.
Right.
But maybe you weren't truly full.
Right.
Or satisfied, right?
Yep. And that goes back to the pillar that I talked about with disregarding the food police, allowing ourselves to eat whatever we feel like we want to eat. And since that particular person may have not had that food in a while, then maybe we need to be a bit more cautious on implementing the intuitive eating approach to that meal specifically.
Got it. So you might like pull back on that, build that meal back into a meal plan, work on it through exposures, right? And then address the emotions that go with that meal in therapy, and then move on to intuitive eating once the client was really ready for it.
Yep.
Okay, so it's always a process. You're always going back and forth, just depending on what the challenge is.
Yep.
So that's why you have the eating disorder expertise as a dietitian, right?
That is why it's hard to catch. I mean, it's so subtle. That client could easily make you believe, or their eating disorder makes you believe, I overate. But really, that wasn't the case.
Right.
It was more about the anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it can go the other way, though, right? So someone who's used to restricting can easily tell themselves that they're full and prematurely feel that fullness. As someone who has the opposite end of that, the eating disorder spectrum, which is instead of restricting, they might really feel no control around binging and purging, or just binging with no purge, right? And so they may be telling themselves that they're hungry.
Yep.
And so what's the term for that? Is it like
psychological hunger?
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Did you just coin that term? That's awesome.
It's probably around there somewhere.
Trademark it. So how do you address that in your sessions?
So if someone struggles with binge eating behaviors, it's going to be more centered around identifying our hunger prior to that. So making sure we are eating prior to that. And then also tuning into when we actually feel full and satiated. So a lot of the times when we struggle with binge eating, we'll keep going past our comfortable level of fullness. And surprisingly, clients will know when that is, but they won't know how to stop or depict the exact time. And so feeling okay with, how do I stop when I'm actually feeling comfortably full, not uncomfortably full? And obviously that goes in, just like with restrictive behaviors, goes into the psychological side of things, as well as the physical, biological cues.
Okay. And I mean, exactly. So in our sessions, from the psychological perspective, it's going to be more about looking at different underlying personality traits like perfectionism or shame or depression, so other comorbid psychological disorders that can go along with eating disorders, and exploring it from that perspective. Because essentially, we know in our field that a person with an eating disorder tends to take out their feelings on their food. Yep. And so the relationship that they have with food kind of reflects, some of what they're experiencing on a real deep emotional level.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
So what's the next pillar?
Okay, so the next pillar goes into discovering the satisfaction factor. So when we hear the term mindful eating, which is often confused with intuitive eating, the two are not quite the same. Intuitive eating incorporates mindful eating. That's really focusing on being in the present moment and engaging in the eating environment and being okay with the way that we feel around food.
So that's mindful eating.
That's mindful eating.
Okay.
So that's pillar number, what are we on, 7?
I think so.
Okay. We're on 7. And so it's discovering the satisfaction factor,
Okay.
which could otherwise be dubbed as mindful eating.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
So being, I like to say one with the meal, but really appreciating the meal, eating in an environment that is conducive to tuning into your sensations as well, and appreciating the food for as it is and what you have and how it nourishes your body.
Okay. So even what you just said right there, like being one with the meal, honestly, you know, with the families that we work with, this can be like a dream that they never achieve. Like that's how far away it seems. It seems like something they wouldn't even consider for their loved one because of how deep rooted the eating disorder is by the time they get to us, right? So is true recovery, you know, a part of true recovery being able to achieve this intuitive eating piece of it?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you're treatment planning for a client, right, no matter what their eating disorder is, how would you build intuitive eating into that treatment plan? Is it something that is kind of like way down the road, you know, or, I mean, when do you even start talking to clients about it? Do you give them something to look forward to? Or is it just scary to even think about being one with the meal, right? When the meal is the scariest thing sometimes for our clients.
Yeah. It really goes down again to the individualized approach, but incorporating intuitive eating concepts and the information and education and science behind intuitive eating itself can be done fairly quickly, fairly early in the process. Now, implementing things like tuning into our hunger and fullness, being one with the meal, engaging in true mindful eating, those come down in later parts of someone's recovery. But the concepts of intuitive eating really are introduced very early on, and where we're headed and what could be and what will be for that particular client.
You know, and as you said that, you know, introducing it early on is awesome because it kind of just plants seeds. It lets them know, hey, this is coming. This is part of the recovery process. It's also something that they need time to really process and grapple their mind around, because there are a lot of clients that we work with where intuitive eating is so scary. I mean, it really involves trusting your body and yourself, right?
Yep.
And half our clients, well, more than half our clients struggle to even just trust us as their treatment team providers. And so, you know, we're asking them to not just only trust us, but to start trusting themselves in this process.
Yes. And I think as you mentioned that now, when clients come to us, we really are like building that trustful relationship with them, and then kind of transferring that trust or empowering them to trust themselves through intuitive eating so they can live their lives free of their eating disorder. And so it's definitely a process. It takes a while. And it takes help and it takes treatment and it takes support. And it's not just all right, I know about intuitive eating, I'll go implement it now.
Right. Because people without eating disorders can't even really do that, right?
Oh,
it's all over the place. So. All right. So what's the next pillar?
All right. So we're getting into the pillars that are pretty, a little bit more related to body image and movement and our overall health. So the 8th pillar is respecting our bodies. I feel like when I just say that, it's a pretty loaded statement. So learning to respect our bodies for what they can do, and working on our body image as a whole.
Okay. And so how would you do that in a nutrition session?
Well, so a lot of times people will come to us and say, well, I think this food's going to make me do this. I think this food's going to make me gain weight. I feel this food is going to make me fat or get fatter or store more fat. I feel like this food high in carbs is going to just store there in my body and make me gain weight. So a lot of what we do around body image is education on how food actually does not influence our body that way. And particular foods like carbohydrates, high fat foods aren't actually bad for us, and they aren't automatically stored. So really going into, okay, so how is food relating to our body image? Which obviously there is a connection there for most people.
Right. And I think it's almost like a common myth that the foods you eat directly contribute to the way you look.
You are what you eat.
I was just thinking that.
It's pretty tough. I love French fries. I mean, I'll be a French fry all day. But we really aren't what we eat when we take that term very literally. So yeah.
Okay. And so you address that in nutrition sessions, but even as the psychologist doing the therapy, we do a lot of body image work with our clients too.
Yep.
So we work on, different things. I mean, really similar actually to in terms of, let's be grateful for what our body actually does for us. Let's think about our body in that manner. What are the freedoms and liberties that you have in your life just that you may be taking for granted? I mean, you were able to get out of bed and walk to the car this morning to drive yourself to the appointment. Without your legs and feet, you wouldn't have been able to get here, right? And so just from a very practical standpoint, thinking about the body's use and what it can do for us.
Absolutely.
But we also work on just self-esteem and positive affirmations and viewing ourselves with value apart from what society may say about us.
Yeah. Our body is our home is a common statement, and treating it as so, and loving it and learning to recognize the things that our body does for us. I think I may have mentioned this. Our body's an instrument, not an ornament. That's from a popular body image blog, and I love that statement. It's really cool.
Yeah. I love it too.
Yeah.
Say it again, just one more time.
Our body is an instrument, not an ornament.
Okay.
Yeah. I think another aspect of where nutrition and dietitians come into play with body image is really working with people on accepting their natural physiological structure. We all don't fit this mold that society really wants us to be in, or that is modeled for us, and photoshopped pictures or social media. Are magazines even a thing anymore? I don't know.
They're all there at the checkout line at the grocery store.
So really accepting our bodies as they are nourished. And not completely at war with food all the time. And sometimes that's going to be a bit more uncomfortable than where we had originally planned or why we dieted in the first place. But understanding that restriction, living at war with food, dieting, and having an unhealthy relationship with food just simply isn't worth our lives.
Okay. Yeah. And so when you said that, it kind of made me think of, clients who literally undergo physical change when they come into our care, right? Because some clients need to be weight restored. And essentially we watch clients maybe be in one body size and then move into another. And it's a real thing that is happening. We can't ignore it. So how do you address that? Being comfortable with a body that's nourished when maybe they've spent a long, long time staying away from that state.
Yeah. I mean, working through each intuitive eating pillar, continuing to educate from a nutrition standpoint, being empathetic, because each person is feeling what they're feeling in their own body, and really validating those feelings for clients that go through that with us, but then providing reassurance that although this is uncomfortable and new, that doesn't mean it's bad.
I love that. So, you know, staying away from judgment and being one with the changes, right? What's the next pillar?
So the next pillar is exercising, movement, feeling the difference. So this means that we are straying away from and learning how to not exercise from a point of weight loss, from the standpoint of calorie burning, from I gotta just get this muscle going and lose this fats and I'll be okay. Really viewing and learning to view movement from the standpoint of what do I really love and enjoy? What makes me happier? What activity did I do as a kiddo that I used to love and not think twice about how many calories or what I've eaten or justifying the piece of chocolate cake I had before? And really moving for a different intention outside of dieting, weight loss, toning, just really moving our body because we know it's so supportive in mental health. We know it's supportive in physical health as well.
Yeah. So, when I try to talk to clients about this in session, you know, we like to use the term at the Red Clinic, joyful movement.
Yep.
And so we literally will break that down for our clients in therapy sessions because this can be really hard to wrap your head around. I think, you know, society and the way the word exercise is moved, really the connotation that comes with that now is just an automatic association with, well, we exercise to lose weight. Like that is just it, hands down. That's how people view that word.
Yep.
And so when you talk to people about what is exercise, you know, they talk about, like you said, going to burn calories, going to the gym to tone, maybe taking a really long run to get their cardio in. And it's all in place for this end goal of burning calories, losing weight, and changing the way their body looks. And so when I educate clients on this, we will go back to like, what are some of those activities you enjoyed when you were a child? So I'm really glad that you said that. Or what are some things that you are doing now in your life that you never really thought of as joyful movement? You know, so this can be things like going on a bike ride or taking a walk, maybe dancing with your kids in the living room, right? It's just anything that kind of involves movement, adds quality to your life, maybe even enhances your relationships, and it's fun. It's fun. It's not punishment. It's not something you have to do because you ate a chocolate cake earlier in the day.
Yep.
It's just something you do because you enjoy doing it. And wrapping your head around that can take, honestly, like multiple sessions. I can't tell you how many times I have to work with clients on this over and over again to let go of the diet mentality. The exercise is for weight loss only, right?
Yep. Yeah. I think too, a lot of our work goes into empowering our clients as well in the movement stance, because a lot of our clients come to us maybe not feeling comfortable going on a hike or going to a dance class because of their body shape and size. And so really empowering clients to feel okay that our body can be used for movement. Our body can move. We can have fun doing this. We also don't have to fit the mold of what someone that's portrayed on social media running or working out and a sports bra and leggings. All power to you if you do, but you don't have to fit that mold to move your body.
Right. Yeah, I love that you said that. It doesn't matter what your body size is or anything. The nourished body is what counts, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so how many pillars do we got left?
Just one.
Okay, let's finish it out.
Number 10, our last pillar is honoring your health with gentle nutrition. So this is when we talk about health concerns with our clients, such as if someone were struggling with their blood sugars, if someone struggles with celiac or Crohn's disease, if someone struggles with food allergies, navigating those concepts and those nutrition recommendations alongside of intuitive eating. And so I always identify this pillar as the most complex, which is the last one. Usually people struggle around this because, well, if I have diabetes, can I drink soda? If I have diabetes, can I consume this high carbohydrate food? So navigating, monitoring our health with intuitive eating.
Okay. And so your expertise as a registered dietitian lends itself perfectly to this.
Absolutely.
So how do you navigate that in session with clients?
Yeah. So again, I feel like, when clients are ready to really adopt that truly and have worked on the prior pillars and really coming from the space of even when we do have an illness, I'm throwing out diabetes there just because that's very common. And, when we have something like that, we don't have to restrict. There's such a fine line between restricting and balance. So how do we view our food choices, again, in a non-judgmental way, but then also saying, okay, I need balance here to monitor my blood sugars. It's not necessarily saying I can't ever have pasta again, which would more go alongside the dieting mentality. And then also, like, if someone has celiac disease, they can't have gluten. It's not an option. And so how do we navigate mentality around food with not being able to have gluten like other people around us do?
Well, and this pillar, it makes me think of the just wide range of people that we treat, right? Because celiacs or diabetes will walk through the door all the time. I mean, eating disorders and some of these other health issues happen together constantly. I mean, we see it all the time. And so we've met kind of everybody on the spectrum where individuals are over-controlled and they're restricting tons and tons of food groups and doing what they think that is right for them.
Right.
We have individuals that maybe sometimes follow, certain guidelines and then other times really struggle with it. And so they're just kind of all over the place. And then we have clients who don't consider their illness at all. We have so many clients like that,
right.
Where they're just so wrapped up in the eating disorder and the urges that they get with the eating disorder. So it might be to binge on foods that maybe they shouldn't be having because of a certain illness. Or they might be using their illness to control their weight or how they look. So, I mean, the eating disorder can take advantage of that in so many ways, right?
Yes.
And it becomes so complex.
Yes. Yes.
And sometimes even dangerous, right?
Right.
So how do you address that with clients when you know it's a part of the eating disorder?
Yeah. Again, kind of going back to each phase of their recovery, and if we need to retract concepts, we can, and then reintroduce them. When someone, and I've had that happen too, where clients are really kind of, they're not realizing that their eating disorder is doing that. Maybe they do realize that, but saying, okay, what is the intention behind our intuition? Is our eating disorder taking over our intuition? Are we restricting versus balancing? Are we saying no to these foods because they're not good for us? And instead of saying, am I moderating those foods if we need to based on an illness? So it really is it's so individualized, and your intuitive eating journey is your own. Everyone's different. So how we work on these pillars, how we challenge thoughts around our eating disorder or disordered eating pattern or negative body image, it really just depends upon your own process, and you, in your own way, really define intuitive eating with this as a base.
Okay. And so that individualized approach is so important here.
Oh, yes.
All right. So anything else you want to add about intuitive eating today before we end?
No, I think that it is the way to, it is the passage to improve our relationship with food for anybody. It's not just for eating disorders, like you were saying, Dr. Schwalen. This is for anybody, to really starting to embarking and improving our relationship with food It challenges a lot of things that are very common in our society and things that when you see, you can't unsee. And working through that really opens up so many doors in life that when we're not feeling obsessed and again at war, then we can focus on other things that are important to us.
Well, thank you for your wonderful words of wisdom today. I'm so glad you joined us.
Me too.
Thanks for tuning in to the Red Clinic podcast. We'll see you next week.